And I think, so it sounds to me like you are more of a plotter. So you like to outline
Mhm.
and kind of have. So did you always feel like that? Or did, like, when you first started, did you just kind of sit down and start writing? Or did you start with an outline?
I started with an outline. I think that outlines are really beneficial for me because it can tell me broad strokes, like the main events of what I want to happen. And you can put little wayposts in between those major events. And then you still have some room for growth, or you still have some room for, um, some improvisation in your writing, or to discover some things while you're still sticking to the story that you wanted to. I think a lot of the main character beats in Pathlighter were things that I kind of allowed to grow naturally during the process of writing the book.
Hmm.
So I had a lot of the major events put together, especially since since it's an adventure, epic fantasy adventure, a lot of it are just like points A, B, C, D, like from where you start to where you want to, the journey to get to.
Hmm.
Um, but in writing the second book, in a lot of ways, Pathlighter is my Fellowship of the Rings, and then the second book that I'm writing right now is my Two Towers, whereas you open up the world a lot more. Some
Hmm.
characters might get split up, introduces a little bit more world building, a little bit more politics and stuff. And it's proved a challenge, because now my wayposts are kind of all over the place, and I have to, really, really be meticulous in how I plot between those. Um, but at the same time, I don't want to write the same book three times. I'd rather try something different and
Hmm.
not quite get there, than just do something that is redundant and the same thing over and over.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm similar. I like to have a bit of a structure, like I kind of that figuring out a couple of the main points and then eventually figure out how they connect. Um,
Yeah.
because I can't. It's hard for me to just sit down and, like, I'm just gonna write.
Hmm.
'Cause I get really stuck really fast, so I like to think through it a little more, and I have gone to the extreme of that where it's like you think through it too much, and then you lose some of the kind of creativity of just writing it. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of
Hmm.
that I like to have. One of the things I like to do is just starting with, like, a narrative structure, so, like, the three
Hmm.
act story structure or something like that, and ultimately it ends up changing quite a bit. But I
Hmm.
think, especially for new writers, I think that's a great place to, like, just fill in these beats and then start changing it. But it gives you that starting point of, like, I don't know where to begin, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that the allowing, like, the room for growth and having a starting point, it's something that, like, George R. R. Martin described as, like, instead of planning or pantsing, it's gardening, where
Mhm.
you have the plots where all these plants are going to go, but then you tend to them as they bloom and mature. And
Mhm.
because do I think that George R. R. Martin had a significant portion of his series plotted out before he wrote? Yeah, I'm sure he had, like, a lot of different stuff, but I don't think that there's any way that he had, like, every piece of dialogue and every character interaction and every, growth of a character relationship or every subplot figured out when he sat down to write book one. Same
Mhm.
thing with J.K. Rowling for the Harry Potter books. Same thing for Brandon Sanderson as he's writing Stormlight Archive. It's you know, it it's that ability for growth that I think makes writing really exciting.
Mhm.
And that's what makes, like, D&D adventures so exciting, is because you know that anything could happen, while, as a DM, you might still want to try and keep them to some beats. It's that difference between railroading and allowing a sandbox. So
Yeah. Do you know who Michael J. Sullivan is? Do you know that?
I do. Yeah.
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 So I haven't read any. I have some of his books on my list, but one of the reasons that I put him on the list was that I heard about how he does this. So he actually writes, like, the full series. Like, I think is one of his
Hmm.
series, like, 5 books. He writes the whole thing, and all 5 books are ready for publishing before he publishes the first one.
Oh my gosh.
And so his reason for that is, like, to avoid kind of what's happening with George Martin, which is He
Hmm.
doesn't want his readers waiting for his books. Like he wants to, like, I'm going to write all the 5 books and then they're going to release once a year for 5 years. So they're coming.
Hmm.
So like to me, that's really cool, and I like his thought process about that. But I don't know if
Hmm.
I could do that. Like I've never heard of any other
Yeah.
author that it does that. So yeah, what do you think about that? Like, is that something you've ever like? I'm going to write all 3 of these, and then you know.
It definitely occurred to me to maybe do that, especially when I kind of learned what indie publishing was like. Um, Indie publishing is very much on your own schedule, and it can be difficult to adhere to that. And especially since a lot of us don't write full time, we have jobs and we have personal lives and stuff, and so finding the time to do that, yeah, it definitely seems like a viable option when you look at it. But for me personally, I don't know if I'd be able to do that because at some point I feel like some kind of thought would set in, like, what am I doing? Like, I've
Hmm.
been sitting here writing these books for however many years, haven't sent them to any editors, haven't done anything. Life is happening out here. So I think finding that nice balance and being able to stand up and walk away from it and then still put a book out reasonably once a year, once every year and a half, I think that's
Hmm.
the right balance for me. Someone like Michael who can, write all 5 books and then publish them within a year or so of each other after that point. I think that's a really, really good strategy, especially if it works for him. But I
Hmm.
think indie publishing is so great because you can tailor it to how you work best as an author and as a business person.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think, yeah, like, because I love, like, because one of the other things he talks about is he's able to like go back and, before he publishes book 1, when he finishes book 5, he can go back and make sure that things all line up. And,
Hmm.
because you even see that in Harry Potter, like, there's a few things towards the end that don't like totally line up with the beginning. Like, there's a
Yeah.
couple of little things here and there, which I think happens to everyone.
Hmm.
But so it's kind of one of those, like, I really appreciate it, but I definitely don't think I could do it for sure.
Yeah. And some series like Harry Potter is like the series that makes stuff up as it goes along more than
Hmm.
any other fantasy series I've read. But that is a real challenge where, sometimes I'll be writing book 2 and then I'll write a scene and I'll come back to it and I'll just kind of read over it and go, did I even really like read what I wrote? Did I even really read book 1 or anything like that? Because I'm like, this doesn't match up. But that's the thing about drafting. You just have
Hmm.
to kind of roll with those and you catch the inconsistencies, and especially if you have a good editor, the editor will be able to help you with
Yeah.
those things. um, Getting the book on the page is half the battle, and then getting it to look like something resembling something people will want to read, that's the other half. But the first half is just as important. Like, you need to have those words on the page.
Hmm.